Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, and we're going to talk about the new Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition source book, which is Rime of the Frostmaiden, which is an adventure source book put out by Dungeons & Dragons. And rather than do a review or talk about what's in it, what's not in it, what I want to do is I want to talk about where Rime of the Frostmaiden fits in the pressure valve that each Dungeons & Dragons source book manifests as, and what this helped to create, and the political forces within Dungeons & Dragons, the Dungeons & Dragons politics, not American politics, but the Dungeons & Dragons politics of each source book, and what each source book creates and what it stops from being created, all right? So let's talk about where Rime of the Frostmaiden sits in the history of Dungeons & Dragons, what it accomplishes, and what it stops from being accomplished. All right? So let's jump right in. All right? So one, let's just acknowledge what these D&D source books are, right? So one, there are a lot of pressure on these books. And the reason why is there's a pipeline. It is an absolute pipeline, right? So Dungeons & Dragons, man, they crank them out, right? And when they make a product, those products are pretty much on rails. They don't really vary much, right? And that's totally okay. Let me be clear. I like the Dungeons & Dragons source books. I think they're pretty awesome from a lot of perspectives. I have some issues with them, but overall, as far as Wizards of the Coast creating cool books, and there's an entire conversation about if I were king for a day and I got to or queen for a day, and I got to decide, of course I'd do it different, but I really don't have any complaints. They're making 200, so these source books are 256-page, full color, beautiful books, extremely well made. I know a lot of people complain about quality with WotC. I don't know, I think they're drunk on that issue. WotC books are in fantastic quality. I've never had an issue with any of them. They're full color, they're gorgeous, they're bound well. No complaints here. I have no complaints. Right, so when they do these source books, they bring out 2 or 3 a year, okay, and so that means 2 or 3 times a year we're going to get a source book from Dungeons & Dragons. There is an entire small cottage industry of YouTubers who run these things, YouTubers who review these things, YouTubers who talk about them, right? And every little hint is an article, and is a special video, blah 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 blah, right? There's a huge amount of pressure on what these are. So when they did Rime of the Frostmaiden, they said this is going to go up and this is going to go down, right? Or this is not going to progress. So what did not progress, right? Well, for one thing, what are the source books? They are either a celebration of existing lore in Dungeons & Dragons, a celebration of new lore in Dungeons & Dragons, right? Or a celebration of corporate synergy, right? So I'll give you examples of all three, okay? So one, Rime of the Frostmaiden is a celebration of existing lore within Dungeons & Dragons. It celebrates Faerun. It celebrates 10 Towns. It celebrates Icewind Dale. It celebrates the Icewind Dale Chronicles, like the series of books that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman wrote, right? Icewind Dale is real D&D lore. It's a thing, right? So when they created Rime of the Frostmaiden, they were saying, we're going to honor D&D's past. We're going to we're going to make deeper the lore of Faerun, make deeper the game's current connection to Faerun, to Icewind Dale, to Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's lore. And yes, I'm fully aware that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman are actually suing WotC right now. That doesn't mean they're not part of the history. That just means there's the parents are fighting. There's a grown-up fight, right? I don't think it's a big deal. So basically, this is a celebration of existing, right? What's an example of celebrating new lore in Dungeons & Dragons? Well, Eberron was new lore in Dungeons & Dragons. It was a really exciting new when that was published. And guess what? Explorer's Guide to Wildmount is a celebration of new lore for Dungeons & Dragons. And also, that source book was saying we are going to have community-created content, right? So Matthew Mercer is not a Dungeons and Dragons designer. He's not really a Dungeons and Dragons writer. He is a part of the Dungeons and Dragons community, and he was brought in and given a special platform to build his own source book. And I'll tell you, Explorer's Guide to Wildemount is really the only thing in 5th edition that's anywhere close to Eberron, where you have really an unfolding of new lore within Dungeons and Dragons, right? So every book within, on this D&D 5e pipeline is going to be a celebration of the old, a celebration of the new, or a celebration of corporate synergy. What's that? Well, that's all these Magic the Gathering Dungeons and Dragons books. I am not a fan. I'll tell you that right now. So we've had 2 so far: Zendikar, the Guide to Ravnica, and Theros, right? Which is like a magic. It's like, oh boy, Theros is bad. It's not a D&D setting, right? It's a Magic the Gathering setting, but it's not even really a Magic the Gathering setting. It's like a poor man's Greek mythology. It's a mess. I am not a fan of these Magic the Gathering D&D books. And the reason why is I don't think any D&D players asked for it, and I don't think any MTG players asked for it. I think there's a dude named Robert in Hasbro Gaming who's like, hey, you D&D guys, I know you make a little bit of money. Our MTG guys make a lot more money. Or Magic the Gathering guys make a lot more money. But let's take their chocolate and your peanut butter and mash them together for corporate synergy. Oh, and guess what? Let's pretend that let's all pretend that it's not important, that we don't have to make one single piece of art. We just got to hire a writer who, frankly, are probably more cheaper than good writers. I think are much cheaper than good artists, right? I'll bet you Wayne Reynolds makes a ton more money than the best paid. Well, here you go. There are no rich Dungeons and Dragons writers. None. Zero. Zilch. Zally. Right? Maybe you could make an example of R.A. Salvatore. I don't even think R.A. Salvatore is rich, right? Like, you don't make money writing for D&D, right? That is very much a passion project, right? So, whereas if you are a crazy good artist, I think you could make more money. So that's just my take. That might be debatable. But when they made this Rime of the Frostmaiden, they were choosing not to add new lore. They were choosing not to do any more of these corporate synergy books. Amen to that, right? Because honestly, I feel like those books are a loss. They're a complete loss. And if you think I'm wrong, go over to WebDM, right, and look at their crazy journey to a good review of that book. Like, when it came out, they were like, what do I do with this thing, right? And then 6 months later, they're like, oh, it's great. Well, I love it, right? And so it's kind of interesting just to see the journey that they had. So I think that overall, I'm happy with Rime of the Frostmaiden. I think it's great to celebrate existing lore. And in Dungeons and Dragons, their whole lore, that's an additional issue. But I think it's good that they go back and they celebrate their own lore every now and then. It's not a bad thing at all, right? And then I'm very excited when they create new lore. I like that. I actually like that better than celebrating old lore. But the fact that Rime of the Frostmaiden actually displaced one of these D&D MTG books, every time that happens, I'm going to be more happy than not, right? So I am happy that that overall this has displaced one of those books. So that's where I think the Rime of the Frostmaiden actually enters. And I think it's really interesting to just think, when they decide what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, there's a ton of decisions. And one of them is, what is this squeezing out and what is this allowing in, right? And I think, and I just really thank you very much for listening, and let me give you some time and for giving some time to let me explain that to you, or my thoughts on that particular topic. What do you think? Do you like when they celebrate new lore? Do you like when they celebrate old lore, or are you the one in 10,000 people who actually likes those corporate synergy books? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.